Hey, welcome back to the Live Better, Explore More podcast. I'm Alan Mayseal. As you can see, I have him back. Executive Director for Petaluma People Services Center, Elece Hempel. Former City Council member and retired local attorney, Dave King. We're going to talk community involvement. Last time it was housing, to now it's community involvement. We're going to talk about volunteering, commissions, and if you are slightly crazy, going into at some point an elected official position.
Welcome to the Live Better, Explore More podcast with your host, Alan Mayseal. If you like what you hear, please hit like and subscribe.
Welcome.
More than slightly.
All right, let's go volunteering. All right, especially the holidays, everybody thinks they want to go do something for the day, whether it's Thanksgiving or something around Christmas. And that sounds good, but there are some other things. So who in the organization should somebody talk to? I'll start with you, Elece.
Well, okay. So if we're going to talk about volunteering, I think we need to acknowledge and recognize that when people volunteer, they volunteer for a variety of different reasons. Right now, I think for the bulk of the people who volunteer at Petaluma People Services Center are 60 and older. And one of the reasons they're volunteering is there is this epidemic of isolation, this epidemic of people being in their homes and not connected to other people. And so volunteering is a good way to get out and start to get connected to other people. And I think that's key to why many people volunteer. I also think other people volunteer. It's mandated. Maybe they've done something wrong and it's court ordered, or their high school teacher thinks it's a good idea for them to go volunteer at an organization. The thing that nonprofits wrestle with is so, for example, at PPSC, we use about 800 volunteers a year. Some of them show up every single day. Every single day they show up and they're slicing carrots at the senior cafe, getting ready for home-delivered meals. And those volunteers are trained to really help us do and deliver the services that we need to deliver and are required to use because we have federal money and we have to have a federal match. It's the volunteers that want to show up for 1 day or 2 days. Those are hard volunteers for us to work with because we have to train them. We have to give them something to do. We want it to be meaningful. And so it really is a struggle to have somebody just show up for 1 day or 2 days. I mean, there are opportunities like the Butter and Eggs Day Parade. They're always looking for people to volunteer for the parade. Yes, you have to go to training. Yes, you have to get involved a little bit beforehand, but then you're at the end of the Butter and Eggs Day Parade, your volunteer opportunity is done. But I think when you're starting to look at opportunities and things you do as a volunteer, you need to understand that you're making a commitment, not just a one-day commitment. You're making a commitment to the people you're serving, whether they be seniors or people who need access to food or kids who are getting mentoring. You're making a commitment to that individual that you're serving on a regular basis too. So it should be treated as seriously as a job.
You're going to answer all 5 questions. I asked one question. You just dive into all 5.
Well, I got to get it done.
I'm not asking you anymore. We're just going to talk to Dave.
I mean, Dave.
Dave's ready to leave. I think we need a family counselor here.
Keep me out. Keep me out of this. Keep me out of this. So, okay, listen.
Yeah.
It could be a problem. So, hang on a second. Who would they talk to? They want to do it the right way. Okay, whether it's volunteer on a every week basis or daily basis, or hey, they just want to sign up for Thanksgiving or something like that. How far out on those one-offs should they get? And also, who do they call?
It's in Petaluma, we're not so big that you just call whoever answers the phone at the agency that you're interested in volunteering for. 99% of our volunteers go through me.
Okay.
At some point, because somebody has to find out what they're interested in and what they want to do and how much time do they have to give. And so you got to pick up the phone and you really need to understand the nonprofit that you're volunteering for. I think Dave, when I first met him, was volunteering at Petaluma People Services Center.
Right.
That's why you don't want to make any comments, isn't it? I knew there was some trap here.
Well, I was on the board. I was in my last year. One thing about PPSC is when you join their board, they have term limits, and they don't actually keep you there forever, unlike some other organizations I was involved with. But to answer your question, I don't know who to contact with all the different nonprofits. Every nonprofit's probably different. Depends on how they run. Depends on what you're looking to do. I'll answer the question for the city. You can contact the city clerk. Check the website. The volunteer opportunities to be involved in city service, and I'll put aside city council for a moment. There are numerous commissions and committees that meet and make policy within the areas that they're assigned. For example, we have a planning commission that reviews projects that come through, policies that come through, advise the city council on and provide input to the city council and the city staff about those policies and those projects. That is probably, other than city council, the most involved part of the city commissions. But we have a park and recreations commission, we have a tree committee, we have transit advisory committee. So there's probably a dozen to 15 committees, and they're all pretty significant. But to be involved in that, the appointments are normally made in June of each calendar year. So the application process would probably start in May, and you might start looking at the website in April or contact the city clerk in April to see what you'd be interested in. The duties are usually described on the website in some detail. There are terms. Obviously, if your commitment, something changes in your life, you're not committed. It's not like joining the army, where they won't let you out. But normally you have a term of either 2 or 4 years. And it's a good way to get involved in city government because it does, those committees do and commissions do have a fair amount of influence on policy. As far as nonprofits go, you have dozens of nonprofits in Petaluma, and Petaluma is a volunteering town. It's a town where I know very few people who haven't done something and usually done quite a bit of it. Whether it's serving on a board or, as you call it, a one-off or a couple times, we're going to go help out on Thanksgiving somewhere or help out with the Butter and Egg Day Parade, as Elise alluded to. And I think it's just a matter of contacting or talking to people in the community who are involved. I think most volunteers wind up volunteering not because they wake up one morning and read something in the paper and go down to the organization. I think that's a percentage, but a small one. I think most people are spoken to by friends or acquaintances about, hey, you might be interested in this, you might be good at this. And I will say this about volunteering, at least in Petaluma, and I did some in San Francisco before I moved here as well, and even before that. I think if you are the volunteer, you get way more out of the experience than what you put in. What you put in is vital because that's why you're doing it. The organization needs your help. But the person doing the work, when you step back from it, I think everybody realizes they learn more, they feel better about themselves, they feel better about their community, their commitment to whatever they volunteered for, and they get a lot out of it. And to me, it's a part of your life. To do that, to not do that is to live somewhat in isolation from your community, which many people might want. But I think, fortunately, here in Petaluma, I think throughout kind of the whole Bay Area, there's a lot of volunteerism. And if anybody has any questions, if you're listening to this podcast, just contact me and we can talk about what you're interested in. I can probably give you some direction on where to go. And I don't mean just city government. I'm talking also about the nonprofits because I worked with many of them before I was on city council. Certainly on city council, we worked with and funded many of them as well. And so I have a fairly decent idea of what they do and can maybe discuss your interests in what you want to do.
So you kind of jumped into commissions or committees,
Yeah.
right? So how does somebody get appointed to one of those committees or the planning commission?
The city council appoints. So you fill out an application, the city council goes through the applications and selects however many openings, people for the openings that exist. There are some years where there's an enormous number of people applying for some of the commissions and some of the committees, and other years where it's a little more sparse. I recall one year we had probably 8 or 9 people seeking one seat on the planning commission, and the bulk of them, in fact, if not all of them, were very qualified. So that's a tough choice for the council, but they have to make a choice. We've had other years where we had one opening and had 1 or 2 applicants. I think it just depends on the fates, I guess, really, of those given years. But you apply, the council gets your application and your background information, your resume, so to speak, and then makes a choice. And that's how it goes.
So I'm using planning commission just as an example, okay? Like, what kind of skills are needed or required, or what is it that what do they look for planning commission or Parks and Rec? I mean, you pick the commission or the committee, but what is it? Is there a skill set that you say, well, this person's an architect, so that would be good for the planning commission, right? Is that what is that really what they look at? What if somebody's not an architect, not a builder, just has a general interest in, the type of buildings we have here, or the building that goes on here in town?
Well, the application, I can tell you what I looked to when I had to make a choice. I looked toward professional experience, what people did with their careers. Not only what they did, but how they did it and who they did it with. Any volunteerism that they've done in anywhere they've lived. A little bit of an emphasis, depending on the position, on how long they've been around Petaluma, because I think you don't have to have been here forever, but I think you have having to be here for a couple of years at least gives you a sense of what the city's about. How the questions were answered. Someone who doesn't take a time to fill out an application generally didn't get the same consideration as someone who really completed it in detail. But for, say, planning, someone who's an architect would be someone who knows their ins and outs of building and construction projects, probably some policies, but that's not necessary for any of these. It's really, to me, it's somebody who's got the appearance, at least from the application, if I don't know them already, of having the skills and ability to provide some positive approach to whatever the committee or commission is attempting to accomplish. And you want to look to what exists on the committee or commission currently and see if there's someone in the application pool who might fill some spot that really isn't being filled. For example, you may have 5 or 6 people on a committee or commission that are in their 50s and 60s or older. That's great, but you don't have anybody in their 30s. For example, on the Transit Advisory Committee, it'd be nice to have someone who actually rode the buses with some regularity. We had that occasionally. We didn't have it always, but I always felt that someone who was more involved in their day-to-day lives on the transit system here in town would provide a perspective that was good for the committee and good for the committee members to hear about.
I think to Dave's point, I think those committees and commissions also give you an opportunity to really understand and learn how government works. When I first came to Petaluma People Services Center, I'd been living in Petaluma for 11 years, but I just had started at PPSC, and I had an opportunity to join the transit committee. In part because I rode the bus to the city every day. I understood public transit. Most of the people that were on the public transit committee had not really actually even taken a bus ride in Petaluma. And so it's a really good way to kind of figure out and learn how other parts of your your community works. And because you're figuring it out, there's some success stories that happen too. For example, the commission, which is for seniors, that is made up of individuals 60 and older. We actually asked that get waived because a younger person who works with seniors wanted to be on the commission, and they were able to come to the commission, and the commission realized and recognized that in 2018, when the city of Petaluma changed the model of how we were providing paratransit, they went to the transit committee, the senior commission went to the transit committee and said, how can we help you figure out how seniors can get from point A to point B, because they don't necessarily qualify for paratransit under a non-social service organization run ride, and how are we going to do it? And seriously, that's how I Ride Petaluma, and now I Ride Roner Park at Petaluma People Services Center got started. Was these two, the commission and the committee, came together and said, we need to fix how we're giving seniors rides in our town. And so there are very powerful things that can happen with your volunteering, even if it's on a dais and you're just listening to people and making recommendations and getting a lot of information from staff. So I think you need to with those commissions and committees that are not just with the city of Petaluma, but even at the county level, there's this added value that most of us don't know how government really works. We just think government's, it's just the people on the dais who are elected officials that are really making the decisions and telling us what to do. And it's a very complicated matrix, and you learn that when you sit on those commissions and committees.
So Dave talked about with the commissions and the committees, that there's like an application, some form of a screening process. For PPSC, is there some form of a screening process for volunteers, or does it depend on what it is they're trying to do?
It depends on what they're trying to do. But let me tell you, let's say you decide that you want to be a mentor. We ask that you make a 2-year commitment to this young person. And most people think, 2 years, that's such a long time that I'm going to make a commitment to spend an hour a week with this young person. But most people stay with their young person. How long did you stay with yours? Are you still with yours?
Seventh year, 6th or 7th year.
Yeah. See, so it's those
Yeah.
those commitments to that young person goes back to what Dave was saying earlier. He's probably getting almost as much out of that volunteer opportunity as that young person is by being able to spend time with a caring adult. For our senior services, home delivered meals, working in the kitchen, help supporting us at the adult day program, we have to follow federal guidelines in the application process. And it's a complicated application process that includes updating, your health records, and we need to know all these things. But we have to rely on those volunteers because federal funding mandates a federal match. So if I'm going to get $380,000 to provide home delivered meals in Petaluma this next fiscal year, that's just a made up number, and I wish they would give me that much money. But if I was going to get $300,000, I have to have $300,000 in community volunteer match. So we assign in Petaluma, because we have the living wage, we assign the living wage hours to the hours that we track for that volunteer and can report that as our federal match to draw down those dollars that we need to keep bringing into our community. So not only are you volunteering, you're actually helping us expand and enhance our ability to provide home delivered meals and services to seniors in our community.
Some of the requirements of time, right? I mean, some of the things that people do for you, they could do them daily and that may not take a lot of time, okay? Or they could take a lot of time, right? Being on a committee or a commission sounds to me like there's a time commitment there. I mean, a real one.
Well, for the committees, it's usually once a month. It is a time commitment, but it's not an enormous, I don't think, commitment. I think the only one that you can really, well, there might be others, but the one that stands out to me is planning, because there's just an awful lot of reading involved with everything they do, reading and evaluation and It's kind of like a shorter version of being on the council. We have more meetings, and we had more when I was on the council. We have had more meetings, and that's still the case. But any volunteering is going to be some commitment of time, and you know, if it's kind of going down to hand out turkeys on Thanksgiving, I mean, that's your commitment. It's 3 or 4 hours, and you know, that you have a finite, and if that's what fits your schedule, you can do something like that. But we've talked about nonprofits and government, but you know, just let's keep in mind there's a couple of other areas around town. There's youth sports. I mean, right now you're coaching in high school up in Windsor, and we have all types of sports for boys and girls. So coaching, and there are other volunteer opportunities within those, not just coaching and that kind of commitment. We have the arts. For example, Cinnabar Theater, there's choirs, there's ballet, there's all kinds of things that
There's a
people
museum next door.
There's a museum next door. That's right. I've heard about that. And so there's a lot you can do. You can put some time in to help, and I think a lot of it comes from just being exposed to it. I mean, I can tell you how I was recruited to the PPSC board. It was Elise's predecessor as the community development director came up to me at some event, and then got my contact information, didn't tell me what it was about, and then contacted me about being on the board. And so I wound up on the board when Elise arrived 5 years later. And it's a great agency. It doesn't, even then it did an awful lot, and it does an awful lot today. And the time commitment was not overwhelming. You wind up on subcommittees sometimes. A lot of it depends on how the board's organized and what is the expectation. But you find your place where you can put the time in. I think that's really where the rubber meets the road in terms of time. And there are organizations where you can do a 1 or 2 times a year thing, rebuilding Petaluma, rebuilding together Petaluma. There is a chance, I think they do it twice a year now, where you go out and you work on projects for one day. And there's probably a little more involved in that, but it's not a year-long commitment. Whereas you probably have a year-long commitment to that organization, but that's an example of it not being one. The festivals that are downtown they exist typically one day. Now there's setup and there's breakdown, and it's a little more involved, but it's again not a year-long commitment. And then there's service clubs, which I'm not a member of any, but
You want me to give them your contact
no,
information?
they know where to find me now. I'm pretty sure at this point in my life, it's not yet that everybody in Petaluma knows where to find me. Fortunately, they don't always want to find me, so that's a good thing too. But they're involved in the community in a different way, a more social way in some cases, but in a different way.
Okay.
But I think if you go back to kind of what I said, when I started, there is this need to get involved. People really are craving that. I think part of it came from COVID, and now it's spilling over into what we do day in and day out. They need to find a place where they can fit in. And so, Dave brought up different kinds of boards and different kinds of nonprofits and boards that you can sit on. So there can be, if you're on the board at PPSC, we're a well-established agency. You just provide governance, right? You're not going to be helping deliver meals unless you want to volunteer to help us deliver meals. You're just providing governance. Whereas I currently sit on the Petaluma Historical Museum, and up until just last month, we didn't have any full-time staff that was doing in a leadership role. And so in my spare time, I'm rewriting the governance plans and serving wine at an event and doing all of the things that you need to do when a nonprofit is still kind of small and in its infancy. And so again, it's understanding what you as the volunteer really want to do and how you want to get involved, and then finding that place that you fit with personally. Right after right at the start of COVID, my director of senior services and I went over and we met with the seniors and the volunteers who were having lunch at the senior cafe. And we said, look, there's this pandemic thing coming. It's going to be, 2-3 weeks, right? and so we're going to prepare the meals. It'll just be our staff. And we're going to prepare the meals, and then you can come pick up the meals, the people that are eating at the cafe. And we'll still do home-delivered meals, and, we'll bleach things, and we'll figure out how to do it. And one of the seniors, who's kind of a cranky old guy and doesn't really chat a lot with anybody, he said, well, that's all good and dandy. I like the food here, but I'm going to miss my people. And it dawned on us that we needed to be able to come up with a way to make a connection for seniors to other seniors. And so we started our You're Not Alone program. And of course, in Petaluma, we sent out an email that said, for the 2 or 3 weeks that we're in the pandemic, you're going to become a You're Not Alone caller. We're going to give you a question of the day. You're going to call your senior. Here's the things you can't talk about. Here's the things you can talk about. And then you're going to make an appointment and you're going to call that senior. You're going to check in on them for the 3-4 weeks that the pandemic has happened. So quickly bloomed to 3,000 residents in Sonoma County getting calls from 3,000 volunteers, which is unbelievable. And we have a wait list now. So if you're hearing this and you want to be a caller, it's pretty amazing to be a caller. We
Well,
have
look at me.
we run the program in the state of Vermont, and we run the program for LA County. So it's a calling program where you call the same person every day and you check on them. And we hear amazing stories. We hear some sad stories. But it's taking just a couple minutes to check on this senior, this person who is considered homebound, who wants a check, who just needs to have somebody call and say, here's the question of the day. And we made it through the first 2.5 years of the pandemic, and I didn't miss a question of the day because I was sending out the question of the day. Now they go out about once a week, but everybody still makes their calls. Everybody still reports how long they talk to their person, if they missed them, what they're doing, and it's a volunteer opportunity that you can do from your home. You can do from your car as you're driving to work. It's a volunteer opportunity that really has made differences in the lives of so many people, not just the senior getting a call. We had one volunteer who recognized that her senior that she was calling was starting to show signs of dementia. So she would take the question of the day and she'd write it down, and then he would answer the question. And the questions are geared to kind of jog your memory. Maybe it talk about like, what kind of food do you like to eat, or do you remember the first time you got stuck in a snowstorm? I mean, some of those things that bring up memories for people. And she started to write down what he said. And as a Christmas gift a year ago, she gifted his family. He now has full-time Alzheimer's and is really struggling to even remember who he is and where he is. But she was able to gift his family books of all of his memories because she wrote those down as she was having those conversations. So it's that kind of volunteering where you can take just a simple question of the day and send it out to somebody in the world, and they will call their person and they'll have that conversation. They will talk about their birthdays. They will talk about whatever's happening in their life. At Lynn's service, I met one of the callers. He came up to me and he's like, you don't know who I am. And I'm like, well, I'm sorry. He's like, well, I talk to you every day. I respond to your... And he's been calling the same person since the 3rd day of COVID and still calls her every day. And so there's these magical things that happen when you make that connection with somebody else, with another individual in the community.
Yeah.
We should just cut it right here and just call it a day. But we're going to go to the dark side now. We're going to go to elected positions. So let me just close up volunteering with this. So seriously, if people are out there, and I know you offered up, hey, call me and I'll help guide you to where you might want to go, right? What type of thing? I don't want to give out contact. know who you are. They can get a hold of you.
Every website for every nonprofit in Petaluma and every sports club and every PTA, everybody has a way to get a hold of somebody who can help get you involved in connected in volunteering one way or another.
I think that's real important before we move on to,
Maybe just go down to Aquas Cafe on a busy morning
Right.
and just say, I want to volunteer for something. I happened to be down there this morning, and I'm pretty sure that there were 4 or 5 nonprofit people, sitting around probably recruiting somebody to do something.
there you go.
A few elected officials, and it was busy. It was busy, but seriously, I think what will happen is your friends or your acquaintances will you start talking, and people will get involved.
Help you get there. Okay. So elected positions. So city council, I'm just thinking locally, right? City council, you got the healthcare district, supervisor. So somebody.
That's paid.
True. Well, all right. That's a good point. Except city council gets a little bit of money and gets and it gets healthcare.
It's amazing how much we get.
I get it. You've bought 3 houses on your city council stipend. I'm just saying
There were dollhouses, but yeah, secondhand.
Exactly. But there's something that I get it, but it's a local elected position.
And
right?
I think the point you're trying to make is, as an elected official, it just doesn't end when the gavel says meeting adjourned. It goes on and on and on. People call about different things that are happening. People reach out about a variety of different things. Whether it's even in your jurisdiction, they may come to you because you are an elected official and they need you to help connect them to other elected officials.
So that's true. That's part of the demand, right? Yeah, and you would know that. Well, you both do because you're both elected officials. So if somebody wants, seriously, I could line up the jokes right now, but if somebody is truly interested, okay, and is thinking, and I, put it at city council, the healthcare district, let's don't do supervisor, but something along those lines, what advice would you give them? What advice would you give them?
Well, if they're going to run for public office, the council you have to run for. Healthcare district, not much of a campaign. But if you're going to run for city council, you need to know all of your deadlines for filing everything. You need to have a campaign team in place so that it doesn't have to be professionals. I never really use professionals. You have to figure out how to get the word out. You have to have a pretty clear and cogent set of ideas of what you want to accomplish and why you're running. I think you have to comprehend that this is not, it may be a popularity contest to some degree to get in, but once you're in, it's not a popularity contest. You're going to have to make some very difficult decisions that may counter the viewpoints of people you know and respect. And it's not just once or twice over the course of you run for 4-year terms, but I 8 years. It's not just once or twice, it happens frequently. You're going to have to comprehend that there are people who are going to criticize you. Maybe it's not justified in your mind, but that's part of it. You're going to have to learn a lot eventually about every aspect of local government. No one I know goes in has all that knowledge, but you have to learn it in time. You have to listen to your colleagues. If you don't listen to your colleagues on the city council, I think you're failing your public, your people that elected you, and the staff, the city staff, which actually runs the city, at least this city, and what they recommend and what they have to say about certain matters. But in terms of just running, I think the first points that I made are all of that. And then you need to start talking to people about support, whether you're going to have people that are going to be willing to support you, whether they put up a lawn sign. It's not free to put together a campaign. You have to raise some money. Not a ton, And we now have district elections, so the amount of money required should be diminished quite a bit. It should be. Whether it is or not depends on the fundraising. But you have to have some money raised, which is not easy because you can't get one big check from one big donor. There's a $200 limit for a contribution here in Petaluma. And so you have to do all of that. And then when you get going, while you're running, you have to be prepared to knock on doors, to walk up to somebody's home, knock on their door. You'll have a little bit of information about them. You'll have their name, their party affiliation if they have one. If they're on your list, it's likely that they're of someone who votes. And you have to be prepared for anything. You're knocking on a total stranger's door multiple times every day, or almost every day. Scores of times every day. And that is actually more fun than you would imagine once you get into the rhythm of it, because you're talking to people at their doorstep, if they're willing to talk, and not all of them are. They don't have time or interest. And you talk to them about what they want to talk about. When I campaigned in 2014, I wore my San Francisco Giants hat. The Giants were in the playoffs. People were excited about that. They see the hat. We talk about the Giants, and we get into the issues. But they get to at least have a chance to see that you're a human being, and that you're not somebody out of politician college, and that's who actually serves here, and the people that live here. And have lived here typically for a while. So those are the things you need to do. You should probably talk to somebody who's been on the council, somebody and just ask them what you need to do and what it's about, so that they can tell you what it's about in a private conversation. But I'd encourage people to run. Overall it was a good experience. I mean, there are some moments I wish I wouldn't want to relive, but mostly very good, and I'm glad I did it.
Would you look for a better campaign manager?
Well, my campaign managers, one is sitting at the table, and one I was married to when she was alive, and they were great. Both of them very organized. Lynn, extremely, incredible. And Elece, when she had time, because she's running about 9,000 things in town. And I had other people who were really great. I mean, there are people that I had a group of guys that put up the big signs. That was their job, one of their jobs. I had a treasurer who totally thankless job. It's accounting, basically. It's law and accounting. But I had hundreds of people who we did an all precinct walk, because it was all city at the time, and we had people that went out and knocked on doors. You were one of them.
I think it's if you are considering running for city council or any elected official, I think it's important that you find a candidate that you want to support and walk the precincts, so that you really get to feel and understand what it's like to knock on the door. I know Dave didn't always ask that you knock on the door, but if I knew that person, and odds are I did, I knocked on the door to say, I'm here because I support Dave King, and I think it's important that you understand why I support him too. So,
okay.
Yeah.
It's work. It's a job to get the job, and the job is a job that is a semi full-time, not full-time. I mean, it's designed to be part-time. The other piece of advice I'd give if someone gets elected is, don't make it a full-time job. Mm-hmm. Don't let it become who you are, because if it starts to become who you are, in your mind you're, I think, a bit of a professional elected as opposed to being a citizen. You still should do all the things, as many of the other things that you would do normally in your life. And if it means missing some things, you miss some things. People they'll think what they think.
Okay, so that sounds like that's somebody, you're talking to somebody who's at the stage of, okay, I've done these other things, now I'm ready to really put together a campaign, or I'm going to really head down. What about before they get to that point? Are there certain things, hey, you should sit on this committee or sit on any committee, right? Or you should, I think the part where you said, hey, find a candidate you like and, go knock on doors for them. I mean, what are some of the things that could help prepare them? And it may not prepare them to run. It may prepare them to understand if they should or shouldn't run.
Well, I don't know that there's any specific thing someone should do before they run for a city council position in Petaluma. I think being involved in your community before you run is helpful, because you're going to, first of all, you're going to meet people, and if you make a decent enough impression, they're going to support you, or at least vote for you. I would try to have a handle on what makes Petaluma tick. We talked about a lot of it in this conversation about nonprofits and kids sports and the arts and so forth. I think knowing and being involved in that is important, because that makes you make a more well-rounded decision. I would practice talking to people who don't agree with you. I would practice truly listening skills. And there's a lot of people who think they listen, but all they do is close their mouth temporarily. And they're not really listening. But
have you been in our arguments?
I'm not going to be involved in this part of it.
Dave, really, I do listen because I've learned not to talk.
Right. And so, because I think it's important, because you're going to hear that when you're up here. You don't have to necessarily agree with it, but sometimes people will say something that you didn't perceive, and you'll learn something, and you may adjust your position accordingly. But I think those are the things you should do. And I don't think you have to have lived here for X number of years. It doesn't hurt. We're now in district elections, so knowing your district a little bit, knowing what's in it, and it would be helpful. Now there's no excuse for any candidate not to knock on every door of anybody who might vote for them,
right,
or vote in the election. It's I don't know how many, maybe a couple thousand homes, and you could. Yeah. You're not going to talk to them all because people aren't always home, but you should have personally covered that. And if you're not prepared to do that, then you probably shouldn't run. And you can do it late afternoon and weekends. And it's citywide. You're not going to catch every door.
Right.
I was not able to do that, but I knocked on thousands of doors in each campaign. You start at 10 o'clock on Saturday and you go till 3 or 4 in the afternoon till you're not making sense at the door anymore. You're showing up, as a sweaty pit and really not making any kind of impression. Or perhaps your tolerance has diminished a little bit, so you're not going to. Yeah.
And yes, I think Dave has been one of the most thoughtful elected officials we've ever had, and I think part of that comes from the breadth of experience that he brings. He brought to the table when he ran and still brings. So when I originally met Dave, he was serving on Petaluma People Services Board. He was chair of the Chamber of Commerce. Or incoming.
I think I might have been president that year. I was chair of the Government Affairs Committee.
And the Government Affairs Committee is small but mighty, but it tends to ebb and flow, and that's another place where a small business individual in Petaluma could get involved to really understand how our government works, because I truly think that a lot of people don't understand the government processes and all of the nuances that come with that. And so really kind of relying on what your experiences are and how they would fit into a leadership role as an elected official, I think are really, really important pieces of what you need to know and understand. And I also think, Dave will tackle those tough issues. Sitting on the healthcare district, I get some issues locally, but many of my issues are speaking to our elected officials at the California level to help influence how they rule and how they set policy for how we provide health care in our community. And so it's kind of a different animal. I don't know, the healthcare district doesn't necessarily have lobbyists, but we do have lobbyists as a healthcare district association for the state of California. And so we're able to actually move the needle oftentimes on what elected officials at the state level are doing to influence how we deliver healthcare in a local level.
Okay, let's close with this. Let's just one thing. What would you say was the greatest reward, or the one that has meant the most? Maybe it wasn't the greatest. It was just something that you got from something you did that's volunteer, or sitting. I didn't bring up. I was going to use this as my joke. Hey, what kind of compensation did you get on city council? Right. Same with you. But aside from any of those types of things, what is the one thing that you go, that was a gift that I didn't expect, or it was just something I got that I didn't know I was going to get? A positive thing.
There's so much positive from not just city council, but the other things that I got a chance to do. I think coaching girls sports all those years, it was very rewarding. You're dealing with young kids, dealing with sports, and I love sports, and you're getting to teach them, among other things, your love for the game, and to carry it out, to help empower young women. And I think athletics does a great job with that. I think that was extremely rewarding, although I could probably go to every nonprofit that I worked with, as well as city council and the commission. I was on the youth commission when it started 24 years ago. For 5 years, and there's just a lot of things you point to. It's a large part of my life, and it was a large part of my wife Lynn's life too. Well, what she'd wound up doing, and I would say if she was here, she would say the same thing about the rewards you get from doing that. It's not financial, as you pointed out. My gross compensation for city council on an annual basis averaged about $150 a year. So I netted out. I think I netted negative, actually, when I look at some of the things that happened that I had to pay for. But that's not what you do it.
Right.
And I think if you look at the people that are up there now and you look at the people that have been up there in the past, that's not, obviously, they're doing it because of an interest in public policy. They're doing it because of passion for the city, and I would bet most of them feel pretty rewarded for their time up there.
Okay.
I would be surprised if I'm sure there are people that have come off city council embittered, but by and large, I have to believe that most of them, in the end, especially when you're looking back, you're not in the moment. You're looking back. You can look at it and say, I'm glad I did this. This is a good experience for not just for me, hopefully for the city too.
Okay. How about you?
So I have to.
I'll give you the answers: love, honor, and schlep.
Yeah, that's what his role is.
Yeah.
No, I have to echo what you said. You do those things. I do the volunteer work that I do, and I volunteer for a lot of different things. Because I love being connected to other people, and I love being able to learn more, and I love being involved and engaged. But when I think back on a gift that volunteering gave me, in a weird way, I have to go back to 1978, which was a long time ago. It was a really long time ago.
I remember.
And I was named Washington State's Junior Miss. And that's a scholastic achievement recognition. I didn't have to put on a swimsuit. I had to do some physical fitness competition. But that gave me an opportunity to serve the entire state of Washington in a way that I never, ever thought I would. There was no compensation. There was maybe a little bit of scholarship money, and back then you only needed a little bit of scholarship money to go to college. But it gave me this wide lens that sometimes we have to use when we look at our world. You know, and Dave was talking about people who don't listen, they just are quiet for a while. I think sometimes we don't go wide when we look at where we are and what our community gives to us. We stay in this smaller lensed area. And with that role as Washington State's Junior Miss, I got to go really wide. I got to learn what was happening in Seattle and what was way different in Spokane, and all these tiny little communities around Washington State. And I think that gave me this opportunity to look at big picture and then be able to bring it home in a narrow picture kind of way.
Wow. I didn't know that. I
still
thought I
have
knew a lot.
I still have
You're holding
the
out.
T-shirt that says "Coke gives life to Washington's Junior Miss." I'll wear it tomorrow.
In the back it says, "Don't coog it." All right, that was it. That's good. Appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Al.
Thank you.
Go.